For more than 2 decades in medicine, I've watched disease take away things people thought could never be. Stolor, strength, appetite, sleep, confidence, dignity, and in the most painful cases, time. I have sat across from patients who came into my office expecting answers, only to leave carrying a fear so heavy it changed the way they breathed. I have seen husbands go silent, wives stare at the floor, children ask questions no family is ever truly prepared to answer. And if you've ever heard the word cancer spoken about someone you love, then you already know this truth. It doesn't just attack the body, it invades the future. But today, I'm not here to bury you in despair. I'm not here to give you another cold lecture filled with statistics, jargon, and false comfort. I'm here because there is something the public almost never hears about. A line of scientific research so unexpected, so provocative, that when I first read it, I'd stopped, went back, and read it again. Because according to laboratory findings, one ordinary plant, a plant most people walk past without a second thought, showed an effect that was impossible to ignore. In controlled experiments, researchers observed that compounds from this plant appeared to trigger the self-destruction of certain cancer cells, while leaving healthy cells far less affected. And the time frame, just 48 hours. Now let me be very clear, from the beginning, this is not a miracle cure video. This is not a reckless promise, and this is absolutely not a message telling anyone to ignore medical treatment or replace their oncologists with internet folklore. What this is a serious conversation. A conversation about what happens when modern science looks closely at something ancient, overlooked, and growing quietly in plain sight. Because sometimes, the most astonishing discoveries do not begin inside a billion-dollar pharmaceutical lab. Sometimes, they begin in the soil. Before I show you what researchers found, I want you to understand why this matters so deeply. Let me tell you about Daniel. Daniel is not one specific patient, but a portrait made for many I have known over the years. He was 61, recently retired, the kind of man who spent most of his life putting everyone else first. He had plans, modest plans, beautiful plans, more time with his wife, weekend football with his grandson, a long-delayed road trip along the coast. Nothing extravagant, just life. Finally, lived at a slower pace. Then came the fatigue, then the unexplained weight loss, then the scans, then the biopsy, then the sentence that splits life into before and after. Advanced colorectal cancer. Everything changed. And as his treatment began, so did the familiar cycle I have witnessed too many times. The appointments, the side effects, the brave face that fades when no one is looking, the nausea, the exhaustion, the sense that even when medicine is fighting for you, it is also taking something from you. One day, after a particularly difficult week, Daniel looked at me and asked a question I have never forgotten. "Doctor, is there anything else out there? Anything at all that people aren't being told?" That question stayed with me, because behind that question is where science often begins, not in certainty, but in desperation, in curiosity, in the refusal to stop looking. And what I eventually found led me to a humble plant dismissed by millions as a weed, a plant with a yellow flower, a deep root, and a laboratory story that has stunned researchers around the world. In the next part, I'm going to show you exactly what scientists discovered, why cancer cells responded the way they did, and why this one natural compound has sparked such intense medical interest. And trust me. And trust, what happened inside those lab dishes is not something you forget. So, what was the plant? Not an exotic herb from a remote mountain range. Not a rare compound hidden inside a protected rainforest. Not something locked behind a luxury supplement paywall. It was dandelion, yes, the same plant most people have spent their lives trying to get rid of. The same bright yellow flower children pick without thinking. The same stubborn weed gardeners rip from the ground and throw away. The same plant that grows in cracks, in fields, on sidewalks, in forgotten corners of the world, as if nature has been placing it in front of us this entire time. But here's where things become far more interesting. Researchers were not focused on the flower. They were not focused on the fluffy white seed head either. They were focused on the root, the dandelion root, and according to laboratory research, extracts from that root showed something deeply unusual when introduced to certain cancer cells. Now before we go any further, I want to slow this down, because this is exactly where most videos get reckless. Tay jumped from interesting study to miracle cure in 10 seconds flat. That is not what we are doing here. We are doing something more powerful. We are following the evidence. Scientists wanted to know whether compounds found in dandelion root could affect malignant cells in a meaningful way. Not in theory, not in folklore, not in health store mythology, in actual controlled lab conditions. So they prepared an extract and brought it into contact with cancer cells. And what they were looking for was the same thing every serious cancer researcher is looking for. Selectivity, because that is the real dream in oncology. Not simply killing cells. We already know many treatments can do that. The challenge is killing the right cells without devastating the healthy ones. That is where the battle becomes brutally complicated. Most people think the hardest part of cancer treatment is attacking the disease. Often, the hardest part is attacking it without destroying the patient's quality of life along the way. That is why this research drew attention. Because when scientists observed the reaction, what they saw suggested that this root extract did not behave like a blunt instrument. It appeared to behave more like a targeted disturbance, something that certain malignant cells struggled to survive. Imagine that, for a moment. A plant you've ignored your entire life, suddenly becoming the center of conversations about cellular vulnerability, oxidative stress, and programmed death pathways. This is why I always tell people that nature is not primitive. Nature is biochemical engineering refined over millions of years. We are not talking about magic. We are talking about molecules, signals, interactions, vulnerabilities, cascades, and sometimes the most ordinary-looking plant contains the most extraordinary chemistry. What startled researchers was not simply that dandelion root extract had an effect. It was how quickly the effect appeared to happen. Within a relatively short window, cancer cells began showing signs that something inside them was failing. Their stability changed. Their survival mechanisms weakened. Their internal balance started to collapse. And the deeper scientists looked, the clearer it became that this was not random. There seemed to be a pattern, a mechanism, a reason. In the next part, I'm going to show you what researchers believe was happening inside those cells. Why this matters so much, and why the phrase 48 hours has captured so much attention. Because once you understand the mechanism, this stops sounding like a weed story and starts sounding like a wake-up call. To understand why this research created such a stir, you need to understand one word: apoptosis. If you have never heard that word before, remember it, because it may be one of the most important concepts in all of cancer biology. Apoptosis is often described as programmed cell death. I explain it to patients in simpler terms. It is the body's built-in self-destruct system. Every healthy system needs one. Think of your body as a vast, intelligent city made of trillions of cells. Cells are born. Cells work. Cells age. Cells get damaged. And when they become too damaged, too unstable, or too dangerous, they're supposed to shut themselves down cleanly and quietly. That is apoptosis. It is not chaos. It is not violence. It is controlled removal, a brilliant safety mechanism. Now, here's the problem. Cancer cells are notorious for escaping that mechanism. They mutate. They adapt. They ignore signals. They find ways to keep dividing when they should stop. They act like cells that have forgotten the rules of the body and decided they no longer have to die. That is one of the reasons cancer is so difficult to treat. You are not just fighting fast growth. You are fighting cellular rebellion. So when researchers observed that dandelion root extract appeared to trigger apoptosis in certain cancer cells, that was a major clue, because it suggested that the extract was not merely poisoning cells indiscriminately. It appeared to be reactivating a process that malignant cells had learned to resist. In other words, the effect researchers were interested in was not brute destruction. It was biological persuasion, almost as if the compounds were pushing unstable cells toward a fate they were always supposed to accept. That is what made the findings so compelling. According to the laboratory data that drew public attention, a significant proportion of certain colorectal cancer cells exposed to dandelion root extract did not just weaken, they died. And the time frame, roughly 48 hours, is what made headlines so hard to ignore. But here is the detail that made scientists pay even closer attention. Healthy cells did not appear to respond in the same catastrophic way. And if you know anything about oncology, you know why that matters. Because the nightmare scenario in treatment is collateral damage. Hair loss, digestive injury, crushing fatigue, immune suppression, organ stress. So when a compound appears to hit malignant cells harder than healthy ones, every serious researcher asks the same question. Why? Why these cells? Why this pathway? Why this level of vulnerability? One theory is that cancer cells, because of their abnormal metabolism and internal stress, may already be living on a biochemical edge. They survive, but barely. Push them in the right direction. Disturb the wrong pathway, overload the wrong system, and they fall apart far faster than healthy tissue. That is what makes targeted therapies so valuable. They do not just attack disease. They exploit weakness. And Dandelion root became interesting because researchers believed it might contain compounds capable of doing exactly that. Now, let me say something very important. Interesting is not the same as proven. Promising is not the same as approved. Preclinical is not the same as clinical. But when something demonstrates selectivity, speed, and mechanistic plausibility in the lab, it earns attention. Real attention. And this is where the story gets even bigger. Because once these findings emerged, the obvious next question was impossible to avoid. Was this only relevant to colon cancer cells? Or were scientists looking at something much broader? What happened next is the part almost no one talks about, and it may be the most fascinating chapter of all. Once early laboratory results began attracting interest, researchers started asking the next logical question. What if this was not an isolated effect? What if the compounds in dandelion root were interacting with more than one cancer pathway? What if this was not limited to one cell line, one tissue type, one experimental setup? That is when the story began to expand. Further preclinical interest around dandelion root started reaching into conversations about melanoma, pancreatic cancer, leukemia, and other aggressive diseases where treatment resistance remains one of the greatest challenges in modern medicine. And suddenly a plant most people associate with lawns and childhood seed blowing became part of a much more serious discussion. One involving cell signaling, immune support, oxidative stress, and anti-tumor potential. Now listen carefully, because this is where responsible storytelling matters more than ever. When people hear this kind of research, they tend to split into two dangerous camps. One group dismisses everything instantly, because it sounds too natural to be scientific. The other group embraces everything instantly because it sounds too scientific to be questioned. Both reactions are mistakes. Science does not work by emotion. It works by process, by repetition, by scrutiny. B. Challenge. And if you truly care about your health, or the health of someone you love, then hope must always walk beside discipline. That means we have to say what too many videos refuse to say. There is a massive difference between a laboratory result and a proven human treatment. A substance can look extraordinary in a petri dish, and then fail in real patients. It can appear selective in early models, and then behave differently in the complexity of the human body. Dosage changes everything. Absorption changes everything. Metabolism changes everything. Medical history changes everything. That is why no ethical doctor should tell you that dandelion root cures cancer. Because that would not be medicine. That would be fantasy. And fantasy is dangerous when people are vulnerable. If someone watching this is undergoing chemotherapy, immunotherapy, radiation, targeted treatments, surgery, or active surveillance, hear me clearly. This research should never be used as a reason to delay, replace, or abandon evidence-based to medical care. Not ever. The value of this story is not in reckless promises. The value is in informed curiosity. It is in knowing that nature may contain compounds worth studying more deeply. It is in understanding that future breakthroughs often begin as overlooked observations. And it is in recognizing that sometimes the next frontier in medicine is not invention, but rediscovery. That said, there is another side to this conversation people deserve to hear. Because once you strip away the hype, the fear, the clickbait, and the false promises, a practical question still remains. If someone is interested in dandelion root because of its broader wellness profile, is there a safe, intelligent, medically responsible way to think about it? That is where this stops being a viral claim and becomes something far more useful. Because in the final part, I'm going to show you how to frame this information the right way. What it can mean, what it cannot mean. How to speak to your doctor about it, and why one simple question may matter more than any headline you've heard so far. So what do we do with all of this? Do we ignore it completely because it is not yet a licensed cancer therapy? Do we blindly worship it because the laboratory findings sound dramatic? Do we turn it into another internet myth, pass it around in panic, and confuse vulnerable people with false certainty? No. We do something better. We use it wisely. We place it exactly where it belongs, not in the category of miracle cure, and not in the trash can of dismissal, but in the category of serious scientific curiosity with potential relevance to integrative health conversations. That is the mature response. Because dandelion root has a long history in traditional wellness practices, particularly in discussions around digestion, liver support, and herbal nutrition. And while that is very different from claiming anti-cancer treatment, it does mean this plant is not new to human use. What is new is the level of biochemical interest now being directed toward it. And if that interests you, the right next step is not self-prescribing in secret. It is conversation. A real conversation with a qualified medical professional who knows your diagnosis, your medication list, your treatment plan, your liver function, your blood work, your risks, and your history. That matters because even natural compounds can carry consequences. Herbal products can interact with blood thinners, diuretics, diabetes, medications, and other therapies. They can affect digestion, fluid balance, and metabolism. Natural is not the same thing as harmless. It never has been. So if you are someone who wants to explore plant-based support as part of a broader wellness strategy, do it the intelligent way. Ask better questions. Ask, could this interfere with my treatment? Is this appropriate for my condition? Is there a safe form, dose, or preparation worth discussing? Are there risks based on my medical profile? What evidence is strong, and what evidence is still early? Those questions protect you, and more importantly, they put you back where you belong. Not in the hands of fear, and not in the grip of hype, but in a position of informed strength. Because that is what this story is really about. Not just dandelion root, not just one study, not just one headline. It is about how easily the world overlooks what it does not understand. A weed, until scientists test it, until data begins to explain it. A question, until evidence gives it shape. We began with the pain of a diagnosis, the kind that turns ordinary days into battlefields. We walked through the research, the mechanism, the promise, and the caution. And what remains is something I believe deeply. Nature still holds secrets. Science still has more to uncover, and patients deserve both hope and honesty at the same time. So no, this is not a miracle story. It is something better. It is a reminder that the future of medicine may not belong only to what is patented, expensive, and newly engineered. It may also belong to what has been quietly growing beside us all along, waiting for us to finally pay attention. And if that doesn't make you rethink what you call just a weed, I don't know what will.